Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. This is episode number 180 of the show. I have 6 new reviews just for you folks to know. And of course, I'm Ramon Mejia. This week, I have reviews for All Trades, book number 1, Master of None. Also reviewing 8-Bit Bastards level 2 and it's the second book in that series. Then after that, it'll be Gloominess +1, Gleam of Darkness. Then it will be Extension, Gamelit Book 1. After that, it'll be Eldritch Night, a Post-Apocalyptic Gamelit Adventure, The Dark Hierophant Saga, Book number 1. And last but not least, there'll be The Time Master, Interworld Network, Book number 1. Before we do that, we of course go into LitRPG News. And in LitRPG News, we just have one story. Short LitRPG News week. We have Tao Wong. He is extended the submission deadlines for his System Apocalypse anthology until he gets at least 2 more submissions. He's also updated the rules just for clarity's sake. I guess he was getting some stories that didn't quite fit into the timeline, and it wasn't quite clear where those stories were supposed to be and some of the rules that were taking place there. So he has clarified that. He's also, of course, clarified some of the rules. So definitely go check out his website at mylifemytao.com for those short story details. And of course, it's a great series to write a short story, and if you're interested in that. On to stuff that is out now. I haven't had a chance to read this, but it is out now, including Dark Fearless Pioneer from Arthur Stone. It's his new series. It's called a Fearless Pioneer LitRPG book. Also out is the 3rd book in the Omniscience series called Skyflare. Then it is going to be the 2nd book in the Monster Slayer Online series. This is the sequel to Goblin King called Beast Queen from RRRD. Also out is Arcane Kingdom Online, which is the 3rd book called The Fallen City. This is a re-release of Peaks of Power Beginnings, written by Paul Campbell Jr. This is a republishing with new editing, fixed plot holes, and new cover art, published under the author directly. So if you've already read this, it's the same story. It's just the author has put some extra effort into editing and getting new cover art and publishing under his own name. So there you go. That's there. In new LitRPG audiobooks, we have Web of Worlds, Reality Benders, book number 4. That's out as an audiobook. Then we have Sentence Control 2, also out as an audiobook. Age of Victoria is also as an audiobook. And those are the 3 audiobooks we have for you this week. In upcoming LitRPG, we actually have a couple new entries into this list if you're interested. If not, feel free to skip ahead. I'm just reading off stuff that's coming out in the near future, including July the 19th, Controlling the Goddess, which is the 2nd book in the Chronicles of Kira Freya series. Also out on July the 19th is The Other Cores, a Dungeon Core Epic, Station Cores, book number 5. This one was a surprise to see, to be honest. It's going to be out on July the 21st. It's from Portal Books. Renegades, Nova Online, book number 2. So Nova Online book number 1 came out quite a while ago. So I was surprised to see a book 2 come out at some point. So it's out. So we'll have to see how this goes. July 23rd, Cannibal, Demon of the Mind, a post-apocalypse survival LitRPG. July the 24th, Quest for Vengeance. July the 25th, this is new to the list, Realms Between, Magic School, the 4th book in that particular series. July 26th, I'm sure everybody's looking forward to this one, Raise, the Completionist Chronicles, book number 4. July 30th, this is new to the list, the 3rd book in the Illusionist book series. It's a Viridian A-Line side series called Inquisitor's Foil. I've enjoyed that one. Also out on July the 30th, it'll be Skyrealms Online, Greyhold. July 31st, a novel called Imprisoned Online, Gaming the System. August the 1st, it'll be Shades First Roll. On August the 1st, this one is actually new to the list, Varnath, The Black Blade, book number 1. August the 5th, Hero Go, Champions is playing book number 3. There was a change in the release date listing for this novel here, Shadow Sun Expansion. Shadow Sun book number 2. It was originally going to go out at the end of August. The author was able to push the release date up a little bit, so to come out instead on August the 5th. So yay. On August the 8th, it'll be Invasion book number 1, A Second Chance. August the 10th, it'll be the 6th book in the Eden's Gate series called The Ascent. August the 12th, Dungeons of the Crooked Mountains. August the 15th, Scamps and Scoundrels. August 22nd, Dragonheart Iron Will. August 30th, a third book in the Galacticon series, A Check for a Billion. August 31st, Zones of Alakria. Sometime in August, this is still kind of a up in the air release date. First Song, book number 2. September 2nd is going to be The Game of Villains, World of Kark, book number 1. September the 6th, The Cliffs of Eldamar. September the 9th, it'll be Dance Circle Lost New Series, Blood of Fate, World 99, book number 1. The second book in the Gloominess series, called Gloominess Plus 2, Congregation, will be out on September the 10th. We're reviewing book number 1. We'll see how that goes. This one is the one I'm kind of excited about. It just popped up this week, yesterday, I believe. On September the 17th, it is Bibliomancer, a Completionist Chronicles series story called Wolfman Warlock, book number 1. Such a long title. But the exciting part is that it's set in the Completionist Chronicles universe, but it is written by Jay Hunter and Dakota Kraut. So they're doing a co-author thing here, putting a story in the Completionist Chronicles universe. So I'm excited to see how that actually turns out. Bibliomancy seems like it could be a fun class. So there you go. And that's it. All the stuff I know about is coming in the near future. Of course, if you're an author, remember, if you can always let us know. If you have a LitRPG story come out, you can send us the information about it at feedback@geekbytespodcast.com or litrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Either one is a way to reach us. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. And next up is going to be All Trades, book number 1, Master of None, written by Shane Walker. It is 332 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Alex is broke. He's pretty much always been broke. A misspent youth led to mistakes which led to convictions and plea deals, no career, no education, no hope. Now is the chance to make things right for him and his family when the newest immersive MMO comes with the ability to convert money earned in-game into real currency. Well, it's cryptocurrency, but that's real-ish, right? Seeing an opportunity, Alex joins the realms as Jack all trades, looking to make money any way he can. He may be a master of none, but he's determined to learn every way possible to make money and turn his life around. Along the way, he'll find answers to important questions like, can he win Employee of the Month? Do gnomes dream of electric sheep? How many kobolds does it take to swing a pickaxe? Can NPCs commit tax fraud? Okay, maybe he won't answer most of those, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't come follow the high-margin adventures of Jack all trades. So there we go. It's actually a humorous story. And I want to give a quick shout out to thanks to Felicity on YouTube for recommending this to the podcast. Okay, the review. This is a good slice of life story with the main character who, during character creation, trades any chance to use magic with enhanced learning and faster skill gains. It's a min-max story that initially is pretty normal with action adventuring, but later shifts to something else, adding rather thick middle and late sections with crafting, resource management, and gold making aspects. And so it kind of ties into that cover a little bit more. On the game mechanic side, it's fairly normal with the exception of jobs, in addition to class levels. Like in the Final Fantasy Tactic games, players get an initial class, but they can also gain jobs based on the skills they level and can swap those jobs for special bonuses, but they can only have one job equipped at a time. However, the player can only advance one job or class at a time. It's a mechanic I've always liked. And I don't think that it's quite used to its fullest here, but I think it has a good serious potential to keep the RPG progression going in an interesting way, and like seeing how these different combos work out. I think that's an interesting aspect of the story. Overall, it's a good story if you're into crafting and resource management stuff. The combat and fighting aren't the main focus of the novel, so you're not going to get a ton of that. You get a little bit at the beginning and a little bit towards the end, but again, most of the middle is going to be crafting, resource management, kind of job stuff to make gold. And it's interesting if you're into that kind of stuff. If you're not into that kind of stuff, the middle might not be as interesting to you. So there you go. I had a good time with it though. Gets a score of 7.6 out of 10 for me. That's All Trades book number 1, Master of None, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. And next we have 8-Bit Bastards Level 2, 8-Bit Bastards book number 2, written by Joshua Mason. This is 222 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Sean and the Bastards have entered the Bit Realm, and so far it hasn't been all one-ups and treasure. They've tracked Pliny down to a castle in the mountains to the north, and they'll need every bit of their skills honed while playing some of the first and greatest video games to survive its depths. But it won't be easy. The castle soon takes its toll, separating the party and pinning them against some of the most dangerous creatures they've faced yet. Creatures that may not be what they seem. Something has been tormenting the souls of Afterfall, transforming them into shadows of their former selves, and with every twist and turn the council throws at them, that something is getting closer. Add in a devious AI, a skeleton who's watched too much TV, and more retro gaming goodness than you can shake a joystick at, and you have 8-Bit Bastards Level 2. So there we go. I liked Book 1. I thought it was a very interesting mix of like speculative fiction for the future in a VR, like where people are uploading their minds, and some 8-bit fun, like a short level-ish thing, but there's definitely RPG parts there. Book 2 loses me, and that's unfortunate. It just dropped just below my level of like, oh, I'm having a good time with this still. And that's mostly because of the RPG progression. Most of the RPG progression in book 2 happens in like a couple different scenes where the main characters are power leveling. And it honestly didn't feel like the RPG stuff really mattered to the story anymore. A lot of it was summarized. It does exist, which is why this is still LitRPG. But again, it doesn't feel like it's really impactful to the story. It's just like, it felt like it kind of had to be there. But the emphasis was more on the retro gaming, the adventuring kind of stuff inside the game, and kind of this cyberpunk storyline that comes out. And I just wasn't a fan of that cyberpunk storyline, which is why it being a major part of the story is like, that's not as fun to me as like the general RPG progression and adventuring that I did, and the actual leveling up mattering and them getting class skills and stuff that you found in book 1. A lot of that kind of disappears. There's still a lot of the same things that were good in book 1. For example, the 8-bit references, jokes, puzzles, all that is there. However, that's what's there. You're there in that 8-bit world the entire time in the story this time. There's no contrast to that stuff like you had in book 1. Like being in book 1, it's this very large, expansive world with a lot of other elements. I think I need this nice history and background development for the characters. But it's set in this much larger world, and much larger world with like these different little stories. And that was a nice little contrast to just like this 8-bit universe that ends up for the rest of the quest line. And in book 2, it's just that. So 8-bit world, I'm like, okay, I was hoping there's going to be a little more variation. And again, the novel definitely shifts towards this cyberpunk storyline. Again, that didn't just work for me. Overall, I like the jokes and the old school gaming references, but it wasn't enough to carry the storyline for me when there was, again, limited action, more limited RPG progression, and again, the cyber twist thing that I didn't really like. So for me, it drops to a 6 out of 10. Again, that's not a bad score. It just means that it didn't work for me. Might work for you, though, if you like those other aspects. And the RPG progression just doesn't matter so much. So that's 8-Bit Bastards, level 2 of the 8-Bit Bastards series called, with the score 6 out of 10. And next we have Gloominess +1, Gleam of Darkness, a LitRPG adventure, book number 1, written by Elian Tars. It is 339 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Darkness was always kind to me. And after I got stuck in a non-existent game thanks to a technical glitch in a virtual capsule, the God of Darkness became my patron. He gave me power and showed me the way. In this dark world, I'm different compared to everyone else, but I think it's for the better. That's it. Okay, I had a really hard time getting into this novel in the first place. The RPG stuff starts at about the 2% mark on the story, but the setup just never made sense to me. It always was weird. Essentially, a ghost helps a child. Then that child grows up, and as an adult, he's transported into this RPG world in the body of another kid who's already level 4, and it doesn't really make sense how that's all connected. And then the main character is killed within the first moments of him existing there, but he magically respawns with special rules that nobody else uses in this universe. And I'm like, in addition to that, like the very first time I looked at his character, she's like, his intelligence side is literally 0, but he still functions as a person. And again, that's all within literally the first probably like 5-6% of the story. And there's a lot there's like, oh no, that's oh no, that doesn't work. Oh, so for me, this wasn't a particularly good story. And the story really doesn't get better from there. The story seems to push this dark side storyline. It doesn't really come off well. Deaths, though frequent, don't really seem like they have an impact. And the dialogue in the story just wasn't good. It made the story feel a little silly because of the stilted way that the dialogue was. And honestly, the story is slice of life, and I'm generally okay with slice of life stories. I don't need like this like super amazing plot arc, or you have to save the universe, or like there's this big goal, whatever. I'm really okay with like general adventuring and just following a character doing whatever, as long as it's an interesting story, or that character's interesting, or there's something else there that kind of grab me and hold my attention and to make me feel, whether it's the game mechanics or whatever. That doesn't exist here. And there's really nothing to keep me invested or interested in the story at all. The main character just kind of wanders around for no reason, without a purpose. And I was like, oh, these are words on a page. Why do I need to care about this? Unfortunately. So for me, it gets a score of 5 out of 10. I just couldn't invest in it. And I read the entire thing, but it wasn't pleasant, or, so there you go. It gets a Gloominess +1, Gleam of Darkness, a LitRPG Adventure Book number 1, with a score of 5 out of 10. Just kind of found the story kind of meh. Next we have Extension, Gameworld Book number 1, written by somebody. I forgot to actually look up the author's name, or it's not on the actual novelist. It's Vladislav Kaminsky. So there we go. It is 194 pages, $9.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. The main character has never played computer games. By happenstance, he finds himself in the game world. Rules are quite simple. Complete quests and get higher level. Firstly, it looks like it's easy, but how can he fight with stronger opponents which came to this game earlier and stay alive? He must do it because he only has one life left. And that's the novel description. It does illustrate a few points that are going to be issues. This is kind of a mess storyline for a LitRPG story. There's nothing really particularly unique about this, except that the main character can hire NPC assistants for quests. The other RPG stuff is okay. Like, the main character gets a couple choices, but a lot of his character class stuff is chosen for him. So there's not a lot of exploration of interesting powers or anything. However, the actual writing of the story is not good. Sorry. In general, I'm really okay with not perfect writing. Like, I don't mind technical writing errors for the most part. I don't mind like bad punctuations as long as it's not too often. But at a certain point, it gets super distracting for me if it's not quite right, or it's not correctly written. And this novel hit that point for me, unfortunately. The dialogue and action descriptions are stilted. They're kind of awkward. And there's not really much that's going to be entertaining. And honestly, the story feels like maybe it's a badly translated story. Like maybe it's a Russian story or something. And the translation work just wasn't particularly great, because I know that translation work costs a lot of money if you want to do it right, because you have to also not just do translation, but also have re-editing in the new language, and that can be very expensive. Not everybody can afford that. And I think we're going to see more and more of this as like other Russian authors see like Americans buying a bunch of LitRPG, and so they're going to translate their stories but not do it up to snuff potentially. I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm just saying that kind of feels like what this is to a degree, and it may just be bad writing. I don't know, like bad technical writing. Overall, though, this has a missed story, but the poor dialogue, poor combat, and general writing made this an unenjoyable read. It was not pleasant. It gets a score of 4 to 10. I actively dislike this. And again, not that the storyline is particularly horrible. It's just kind of a mess storyline, but the actual writing, the technical writing issues were of a big enough issue that it actually brought me down to like unpleasant and dislike. So there you go. That's Extension, game book number 1, with the score of 4 out of 10. Next, we have Eldritch Night, a post-apocalyptic Gamelit adventure, the dark Hierophant Saga, book number 1, written by J. Marcus Ham. It is 563 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. The world ended as many thought it might, with fire and spectacle. Eldritch horrors descend from the sky to consume the world. Only a last-minute intervention by a mysterious hegemony of the worlds saves Earth, albeit temporarily. Skills, levels, and battles with twisted monsters are part of the new reality the survivors will have to face. Augustus Finn wakes up after surviving countless terrors. He is thrown directly into danger as the twist of fate places him in the area designed to contain and dispose of eldritch lifeforms. Areas also known as dungeons. He will have to compete with monsters, alien peacekeepers, and his own inner demons if he is to survive. So there we go. Okay. This was something that was on my backlist. It came a little while ago. It has actually has a pretty good beginning with the main character caught up in this Eldritch RPG apocalypse. And by Eldritch, I mean like old gods, kind of like almost Cthulhu-ish kind of stuff, but with different gods instead of Cthulhu. The main character in the beginning of the story has a very neat power, reactive learning, that lets him learn or adapt from monsters he's attacked by, but it's pretty well balanced with like a really long cooldown time. So it's not like an overpowered characteristic trait or power. And from there, there's an introduction of some aliens who are trying to contain the madness and eldritch monsters unleashed on Earth and possibly offer aid. The story itself never really felt like a post-apocalyptic story. It felt more like elder horror. And the post-apocalyptic tag was just kind of added to kind of fill in to some kind of category. But, that's a separate side issue. There's a good-ish explanation of the RPG system. And in the beginning of the story, there's actually really good RPG progression based on the point system and buying stuff. However, most of that kind of fades away after about the 33% mark. After that point, the story really loses the emphasis on the RPG progression aspects and instead focuses on the Eldritch horror stuff as the main character starts making pacts with his demon entity in his mind. And at some point in the story, the RPG stuff kind of disappears. It's a plot point, but it actually disappears entirely. And the Eldritch old one stuff, it's not bad. It really isn't. But you can tell from the amount of time that the author spends on it that that's kind of the real focus of the story. And that's perfectly fine if that's what you're interested in. For me, I love the RPG stuff in LitRPG. That's what I come for. And again, it's just after that 33% mark, sometimes the RPG stuff just felt like this kind of thing that had to be there. Or like you could possibly replace it with a magic system or just like a power system, and it would be basically the same story. And again, not to say that it's not LitRPG. The author makes the effort to include power-ups and leveling up a couple times, or like at least a sentence in mid and late story saying, "Oh, I leveled up 4 different times. I have some points to spend," and he'll spend like a paragraph or two, and then it goes back to the Eldritch horror stuff, but it kind of pretends the other stuff didn't matter, or it doesn't. It's not as focused, I should say, on the RPG stuff. And that's perfectly fine. Essentially, a lot of the RPG stuff is just set up in the beginning, and then mid and late story, it's pushed into the background as like the story of the Eldritch horror stuff kind of takes precedent. And for some readers, they're really going to enjoy that. Like some readers love that aspect of LitRPG where the story takes precedence with RPG mechanics. I'm not that kind of reader. I love the RPG stuff. And I love seeing the progression and every system be like a character in the story where it really matters all the time and not just as a replacement for a magic system. You know what I mean? And again, that's personal preference. But that particular shift in the storyline did kind of lessen my enjoyment of the story. Overall, again, this has a nice start to it, but it kind of, again, lost me about mid to end late story, because the RPG stuff that I thought was really well done just started getting minimized and even disappears. If you don't mind light RPG mechanics and you like Eldritch horror and you feel that that's something that you're really into, I think you'll actually enjoy this story a lot more than I did. I'm not that into Eldritch horror, so that wasn't a big selling point for me. So for me, I didn't quite it good. Like the beginning was good, but as like hit mid to late story, just dropped down. So for me, it gets a 6 out of 10. Didn't quite work for me. Again, not a bad review score. It's not boring. It's not a 5. I don't have any bad feelings about it. It's not a 4. It's just like, didn't quite work. It wasn't quite good by the end of the novel. So it gets a 6 out of 10. That's Eldritch Night, a post-apocalyptic Gamelit adventure, the Dark Hierophant Saga, book number 1, with a score of, again, 6 out of 10. And next we have the Time Master Interworld Network, book number 1, a LitRPG series written by Dmitry Bilik. I'm probably going to say that right. It is 436 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. An ordinary Russian guy, Sergei picks a fight in his neighborhood, defending a little boy. Problem is, the guy he's just defeated vanishes into thin air, leaving Sergei to discover he now possesses the ability to turn time around. On top of that, Sergei can now travel between worlds. He acquires even more mysterious new skills and abilities, and he discovers there are many others just like him in our world. Sergei finds his own place in the secret community of the Seekers, creatures with superpowers. He even teams up with a few of his new buddies, planning to strike gold in one of the neighboring worlds. Sergei has no idea that his every step is being watched. He's being shadowed by the Darkest One, one of the oldest Seekers around who will know no peace until he gets hold of some of Sergei's unique abilities through murder. There you go. That's it. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. And again, having read some of the stories this week, I can really appreciate the extra time and effort that the publishers of this novel go through to do like a really good translation of their works. Like it's much harder than it seems, apparently. On to the brief for the story. The cover art on this novel, I was kind of confused about what the cover art was doing with the story, because looking at the cover art as it is now, as it is per the review day of the story, it almost looks like it's a fantasy story, and that's not actually what the story is. It seems like it's almost epic fantasy according to the cover art, but that's definitely not what the story is. And instead, while there are some epic moments in this novel, especially towards the end, this is actually a slice of life, real life LitRPG story. And you wouldn't have gotten that from the novel description, even sometimes from the description. It is Russian translation. There's a couple errors, but again, like I said, this is hands down much better than some of this other Russian stuff that I've read this week that isn't translated as well. And in this book in particular, I actually have liked some of the Russian cultural flavor that I saw in the story. There were some nice annotations that gave explanations for some of the cultural references that I thought they added a little extra bit of flair and flavor that I liked. In the story, the main character becomes again a player or a seeker after he accidentally kills some guy he thinks is messing with his neighbor's kid, and becomes part of this RPG tracked world where he gets the magic ability to go back in time a few seconds. The power is used often. The author essentially writes a bad outcome for a situation. The main character rewinds like 3 seconds, and then we get the good outcome, or the outcome where he's changing the future essentially. And it's not an overpowered ability, which I really liked, because there are limited charges for the main character in this power, so it's not like an infinite amount of retries. It's not an infinite Groundhog Day essentially. But I think it's used well to essentially create some small points of tension that the main character can just immediately resolve with his power, but not so much that he can change huge events in history yet. It might be something in the future, but for now, it's essentially like, do over a couple times at most. The rest of the game mechanics in the story are familiar. You get stats, levels, skills, all the good stuff that you're going to be familiar with. The story itself is somewhere between kind of a normal urban fantasy story, where like you have a magic secret society and this like kind of subworld where people have abilities and they do quests and stuff, and something between Level Up, where the main character has these RPG powers, but he's also using them in his real life to do things in his real life situations that are a little more mundane and not necessarily fantastical. The main character does use his RPG powers, but a lot of the story is, again, just him doing the slice of life stuff where he's earning money, going on quest, learning about the new system he's a part of. There is this sub-story in there about fate, good and evil, which doesn't really amount to anything until like it's forced in towards the end of the novel. Which, by the way, this was kind of it bugged me a little bit, so I know it's going to bug a lot of people. There's a huge cliffhanger on the story, and I'm not talking about like, this is just like a nice tease for the next novel. It's, oh my God, something happens, like, and then it just ends. And I'm like, wait, that's it? It's literally, it's a cliffhanger. And if that bothers you, just wait till book 2 comes out and then read book 1 and 2, because otherwise it's going to bug the heck out of you. And I know it definitely did me. I was like, wait, that's it? I'm like, okay. I mean, it doesn't ruin the story, but for me, it's like, even I'm like, okay, that a little annoying. I guess I'll have to read book 2 now. And maybe that's the point, obviously, but still. Overall, it's not a bad story. It's not as good as I was hoping for my real life RPG kind of story. I basically liked it a little less than Level Up, which is, it's kind of in a comparison that they're both real life LitRPG stories. But I thought it had nice potential. Potentially, I'm definitely planning to read book 2 in the series. But again, I enjoyed it, just not as much as I was hoping I was going to with another real life RPG story. So for me, Time Master Interworld Network book number 1 gets a score of 7.2 out of 10. Still a good score, slightly on the lower end of good though. And again, that's Time Master with a score of 7.2 out of 10. Okay, that's it, folks. All done. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our webpage. We have links in the show notes for all those places that you can support us on the podcast, including links to other places where you can hang out with LitRPG authors and readers and just have a good time with everybody. If you enjoyed the podcast and want to help support us and help keep this podcast ad-free and free for everybody, you can find out all the ways to help support us at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And until we can hang out again, though, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for hanging out with me. But until we can do so again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.